three needs that arise when you detach from the ego. So the first one is a need for freedom. So you're going to have this innate desire for more freedom because the intense level of self-awareness and joy that comes after ego detachment, it essentially makes you crave more detachment because you realize, oh, wait a minute, there actually is a level of joy that comes from detaching. And when you realize that there is joy to be extracted from this experience, this is essentially what leads you to crave more freedom and to create situations where more freedom is able to be created. So the second thing is knowledge. You have to have knowledge because you want to know what is going on during the process. And so you need answers, and knowledge is power. Knowledge becomes power because with knowledge comes answers. And so let's say, for instance, you didn't understand how something worked prior to diving into it, right? Dissecting it or understanding, researching. When you get the knowledge of how it works, it no longer is a mystery. And because it no longer is a mystery, it's no longer scary. See, we fear things as humans that are unknown or that seem unfamiliar. And this is why when you're building a brand, when you're building any type of symbol that is supposed to have some power to evoke emotions, it's useful to stick to primitive shapes and to familiar shapes that people are already used to, but to put your own creative spin on it, because that's what allows some sense of familiarity. So you're like, okay, this logo feels familiar, but I've never seen it before. And that's because you are adding your aspect, your creative twist to it. And that's what's creating the differentiating factor. That's what's creating the separation. And this is only possible through knowledge. Without knowledge, this isn't possible. So the third thing that you need upon detaching from the ego is connection. So you have to feel that you are connected to something larger than yourself. The concept of a self is nothing more than a observer, right? A entity or energy that has the ability to observe a reality. That's what we are defining as self in this instance. So when you have that connection, that universal connection, you feel that you are connected to the universal mind. And when you are tapped into the universal mind, you feel the intense connection of everything else within that reality. It comes down to you opening yourself and essentially creating the opening, right? Allowing those ports to be open so that the signal can be received by those specific ports. And this is, if you know anything about networking and network topology, when we build a system of networks, there's many different topologies, right? And a topology is essentially just the way something is connected. And so if we look at a star topology, for instance, right? If we look at a network that is configured in a star topology, this is a network that has a certain level of redundancies in case one computer were to go down. However, it has certain limitations. And when we talk about scalability, certain network topologies don't scale as well as others. And so when it comes to the connection, the universal connection to the universal mind, you have to keep in mind that when we tie everything, every experience to one model of reality, which is what we call the universe, this is essentially creating an origin point for everything, right? Because everything is being tied back to, well, this happened because this happened, and it is a cascading effect of us singling out points in time that seem to ultimately be determining the course of events. However, this is a very limited view, because if you zoom out, see things in a non-linear way, in a non-time formatted way, okay? Time is what creates the sense of urgency. Time is what creates a environment that is forced to essentially reckon with objective markers. And so when you understand that without time, there can't be any markers, there can't be any events, there can't be any time essentially becomes the glue that holds together not only the universe, but also the universal experiences. And the universal experiences that are passed down, whether through memories, oral tradition, symbols, all these different mediums, they're all utilized to convey information, right? Information that has been acquired over time. And when we look at this aggregated as a whole, we realize, oh, everybody's saying the same thing. The Egyptians were saying the same thing as the Mayans, but in their own special way. They were adding their own special twist. And this is where we go back to the knowledge aspect. The more you know how something works, the more you're able to manipulate the system and have it work for you in a way that somebody else may not be privy to. For instance, if I give you this supercomputer, quantum computer capable of anything, however, you don't know the programming language, well, that computer is now useless. And this is what is occurring as a collective. And so this is important to understand. When you detach from the ego, these three things are going to come up. You're going to crave more freedom, you're going to crave more connection, and you're going to crave more knowledge. And so by feeding these three aspects, this is what will allow you to detach from the ego. And when you understand the ego is nothing more than a protector, right? However, you may not need a protector at all points in time. Because if you think about that, that protector is putting a layer between you and the experience, because it is self, the observer, and then it is ego, an attachment, and then it is the actual experience. So when you are placing that ego, that perceptual filter, what you are seeing is not the actual reality, but rather a skewed reality that is based upon fear. The ego largely operates off of fear. Now, these fear source points can be various, whatever limiting belief or deconstructing belief that is debilitating to the system, it doesn't matter. It's the same across the board, because the negative energy is the negative energy. And when you understand different words carry different vibrations, this is all energy. When you're exchanging these words, when you are communicating in a harmonious way, you understand that you are in sync with the universe. You are in the speed force, per se. That's what I like to call it, because you're moving at the pace of the universe. Rather, if you feel like life is passing you by, that should let you know, just from a perspective standpoint, well, wait a minute, if life feels like it's passing me by, that means I'm on the outside of it. I'm not in the speed force, I'm just observing the speed force. And so when you understand this point of reference, especially in regards to the ego, because the ego is just like a snake. It can strike so fast that you don't even realize it's striked until after the poison is already coursing, And so when you are able to essentially either charm the snake, or, that would kind of be seen as thought diffusion, or you can tame the snake, and you can't ever really remove the snake, right? Because you do need the protector in a sense. But again, you don't continuously need the protector. And so when you keep this in mind of, okay, well, I don't constantly need to wear this full armor, full battle suit, full tactical gear. I don't have to wear this all the time. There's going to be times and points where I can take this off, become comfortable, and just allow myself to take in the environment. I don't have to remain in this hostile type of predator mindset where it is just looking for the next disruptor of the environment and attacking that thing, whatever that thing is that is disrupting the environment. So when you kind of step outside of that and don't allow the ego, the protector, to constantly take over, once you separate from that and you create that separation, one very effective thing that I have found that worked for me was naming my ego. So by naming my ego separate from what I would call my conscious self, it created a persona of itself. And so I saw this persona as a friend of sorts, but it can be an overbearing friend at times. So it's like the friend who realizes that you won't stand up for yourself, so they do, right? However, sometimes they can be a little too rude or their delivery can be a little too harsh. And so maybe we don't want that friend to give the message all the time, right? Maybe we need to step in and consciously think of the situation and determine on if it requires a sword or just a couple words, because not every situation requires the severity to where you have to pull your ego out and cut somebody's head off. But most people operate on that type of default programming because nobody wants, when you see somebody and they're hurting, and they are furious that you see them, they don't want you to see them in that vulnerable state, despite the fact that you do, right? They don't want to be seen in that vulnerable state. So because of that, they put on the opposite. Instead of expressing their feelings of sadness and grief, it turns into anger. Anger is sadness that was never expressed. That's what that turns into. And so when you never express this sadness in a healthy way, this is what creates these calcified hearts, and it creates these cold, bitter people that only respond via ego. They don't know how to intellectualize and how to use empathy in a situation and determine what the best course of action is. And so the best way to avoid this is to slowly begin to detach yourself from your ego. And as you detach yourself from your ego, again, know that three new problems are going to arise. You're going to want more freedom, you're going to want more knowledge, and you're going to want more connection. However, you don't want to be connecting to virus computers. You don't want to be connecting to infected computers. That doesn't make sense, especially if you just spent all the time cleaning your system and getting it in tip-top shape. Why would you connect to an infected system? So now, the knowledge aspect. You don't want to, again, consume knowledge that, and I hate to even say all knowledge isn't useful, because all knowledge has some practical use. But if you're trying to fly a plane and you're learning about cooking, that's not going to be useful. So in some sense, you have to understand what it is that you are trying to accomplish, the goal that you are trying to hit, whatever target that is. And then you have to inform yourself about that process. The best way to inform yourself about the process is to actually do it, the action. Most people are reading about things, and there's people who are actually doing the things, and the people who are doing it are getting 10 times more information because they are learning as they go and they're dealing with obstacles as they go. And that information is not always in a book. You can't always articulate certain points in a book. And so a lot of information is missed. A book is just a certain snapshot, but it doesn't paint the whole picture. And so when you understand through action, you're able to do things that give you feedback that make your actions more effective. And this is just the loop. You do things, you get feedback, you become more effective. You reach a level of mastery. And again, it's just a vicious loop. But when you understand how your ego, how your overbearing friend plays a part in that entire process, sometimes there's going to be points where you need that protection, and there's sometimes where you don't need that protection. It's up to you to develop a level of discernment on when you do and don't need that. And when you don't need it, again, let it rest, give it some space, create the space, detachment, and don't allow yourself to become attached to this energy, this entity, that you are creating, that you are feeding energy by essentially not dealing with the issues that are causing you to be triggered or hurt in the first place. A trigger is just an opportunity to address something that you have not addressed. And until you address that, it's going to continuously come up in different situations until you deal with it and it no longer is an issue. You no longer respond in a hurt way, because you're not scared of being seen in that vulnerable state. You own up to the situation, you own the situation. And once you do that, there is like a radical acceptance that comes with it. And once you have that radical acceptance, nothing in this universe will faze you. Nothing in this universe will shake you. Anytime anything happens, and it seems seemingly bad, you're able to reassure yourself with the simple statement of all is well. What is happening for my best interest. No matter the situation, it may seem bleak and it may seem impossible at the time. But again, if everything in your life up until this point makes sense looking back, why would it not make sense looking forward? You just can't see it. And so you have to operate under the assumption of, okay, what I'm doing naturally is of a higher intelligence that I'm not capable of comprehending, and it's like trying to intellectualize magic. You can try to quantify it, but it's pointless because that would only take the mystery away from magic. And magic is nothing more than self-belief. So when you believe in yourself more than the reality, this is when miracles happen. This is when you're able to create things such as the iPhone, technological advances that didn't exist in a reality. But by aggregating all these parts and putting it together, things that already existed and were already present, but by configuring them in a new way, guess what? You've got the iPhone. And you change the course of humanity forever. You influence the course of humanity forever simply by aggregating ideas, aggregating parts, things that were already present on this earth. By having the knowledge on how to do so, by having the connection to the universal force, the universal God, whatever you'd like to name it, by having that connection, you are able to connect to something bigger than yourself. So therefore your ideas can be larger than yourself. And this is all a manifestation process of transmuting energy and turning it into what you want. But your ego can get in the way of that. And so hopefully now knowing these three things that come up when you detach from the ego, you can better combat them. And now that you know that these three things are going to come up, you can more readily prepare for them. So until next time, family, peace.